Hey, hello to my friends and Pega partners from all over the world. Welcome to the Pega Partner Hour, a monthly webinar aimed at providing Pega partners with the support that they need in sales, technical, and industry domains. Some quick housekeeping. As always, we'll be recording the session. If you prefer not to be recorded, please feel free to drop from the call, and you're welcome to watch the recording at a later time. If you've watched before, you'll know that this is where I try to add something either interesting or topical, but today, no, we have no time for that. We are jam-packed with Pega All-Stars from start to finish. We have Shaun Wortis and Caroline Power. Caroline Power. We're going to show us how to build enterprise applications using Pega's Constellation design and system and the importance of Constellation moving forward. We also have Scott Holz from the Pega Partner Delivery Success Team with some special information on Constellation, especially for partners. But before we get to them, let's take a moment to introduce a very special guest to the Pega Partner Hour, Pega's own Chief of Client and Partner Success, who needs really no introduction, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. John Higgins. John, hello.
The man, the myth, the legend. Thanks, Randy. Hey, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. And for those listening to the recording, we have an action-packed hour for you. So it's a privilege to be here for the Partner Hour. What I wanted to do is I wanted to spend kind of 5 minutes just giving a perspective on why I think the opportunity for us has never been greater. So I'm hopefully going to inspire you as to why it is our moment, and we have something very, very special to go and bring to market. I'll spend 5 minutes on content, and then we'll have about 5 minutes on Q&A. If you've got any questions, queue them, ping them, carrier pigeon them. However, we'll figure out a way of getting those questions through. I want to start with, hey, there's a lot of hype in the marketplace around Gen AI, and if we kind of zoom out and we kind of go at an industry level across the enterprise software market, what are the common perceptions? Like the common perceptions are, hey, it's complicated, skills are rare in the market, it takes an awful long time to get things delivered. And Pega is certainly not immune to that. And given that we really operate on the top end of enterprise where organizations are most complicated, there's an argument to say that not only are we not immune to it, we suffer from it to a greater degree. But if we go, well, why is it so difficult to operate in the enterprise software space? We've got different stakeholders. We've got markets, we've got IT, we've got business, we've got marketing, we've got strategy, we've got a lot of different stakeholders in these large organizations. We as an industry have, introduced an army of specialist roles: business analysts, developers, integration architects, performance architects, usability architects. I could go on, program managers, project managers, I can keep going, but the average project has, north of 10 distinct roles. When you've got that many roles, you're introducing an awful lot of handovers. Handovers cause points of friction. And all of that together with the large enterprises that we're delivering to shows up as programs taking too long, costing too much. And, the Bain report that we've all seen, around 70% of, transformation programs fail to meet their original objectives. If we got to go, okay, hey, great job, this is a Friday, you've just really depressed me, this is the industry that I've been working on. But if we kind of go, right, but at this moment, what choices do our clients have? And I firmly believe, I passionately believe, we're at a crossroads. The crossroads are, there are many technology companies out there that are saying you should use generative AI to build more code. Turn left and use Gen AI to build more code. That's the wrong path. I have yet to meet a chief operating officer, a chief risk officer, or a CIO who wants more code. Right? Because more code inherently has more complexity and more risk within it. So the left path is, hey, I'm going to use this to satisfy a short-term need, much like fast food. It will take away the hunger in the short term, but it's not good for you in the long run. Or you can partner with a platform and you can use generative AI to actually simplify and consolidate and standardize the things that you need to do. So we're at this moment. We're at this moment where we've got a lot of kind of clients who are going, do I turn left or do I take advantage of this, cool new technology, or do I pause and make a strategic choice and decision to head in a different way where I'm going to take advantage of it in order to drive simplification. And what we've seen since we launched Blueprint at the, for our partners, it was at the end of February. For our clients, it was at the end of March. What we've seen is a surge, it's almost gone viral, of client engagement. Like, the level of engagement that we've seen is off the charts. And that's showing up in a couple of different ways. It's showing up in our clients going into Blueprint and spending some time on it. And there's normally three types of scenarios. One is, hey, this seems pretty cool. I'm pretty curious. What can it do? Two is, I don't really understand my business process. I've got a number of different applications doing something similar. What should it look like, and what's my reference? And then the third category, which is the one we're really all interested in the short term, is, hey, I've got a workflow or a decisioning application that just needs to be done. Can I envision it? Can I document it? Can I get going? And if you look at that activity, that you go, right, so we've now got clients creating opportunity that historically we would have had to go after ourselves. If we go to the second part of our community and we go, well, what are our partners doing? What are you all doing? Within a 3-week period, we had 61 partner templates in Blueprint. So first of all, thank you. Second of all, that is an incredible mobilization of our ecosystem to surface intellectual property and accelerators to help our clients get to value more. When you put all of those together, what you're starting to see is that we can get to value much, much quicker. And the pipeline that is self-originated, i.e., it's unique, it's special, or the client has a problem to solve, is worth more than any other type of platform. And if our clients are using the Pega platform to understand their business processes, that can only be a good thing. Now, the final bit is, 2 weeks ago, we released a capability where, as you're going through the journey in Blueprint, you can actually preview it in real time. That's a huge deal, right? So we're taking what has been taking weeks and months into hours and days. And now it's our opportunity to really go after and monetize that. So what I really want to kind of pause and reflect as a community of Pega practitioners today is, there has never been a better time for us to be able to demonstrate to all of our clients, Pega is easy. You have all the skills and experience that you need at your fingertips, and I can get you to value fast. And if we can do that, that means we're going to be helping all of you reduce your cost of sale. We're going to help everybody do more conversion, and it's going to keep all of our field teams that much more busy as we ultimately take a huge chunk out of these large backlogs that these enterprises have been trying to retire for quite some time. Hopefully that's giving you a little bit of energy. Where does Constellation fit within that? Obviously, Constellation is the default UI that will come from Blueprint, right? So as we're going through the detail today, Constellation is absolutely critical to us being able to execute on the overall market opportunity that we're building here together. And with that, I'm going to pause, get off my soapbox, and take any questions.
Well, John, I'll tell you what, I don't see any questions yet. We'll see if they come in. But everything you're saying is fantastic. I've had a couple client meetings, both when we were at Pega World and over the last couple weeks. And the thing that people keep saying to me about Blueprint now is, they say we keep getting pulled into all of these different things that companies are doing that don't mean anything. This is truly something that we see that means something. It shows the clients what Pega does. It shows how you do it, and it's making our process so much more simple to get through the sales process. I mean, people are really excited about what we're doing with Blueprint, and I can't thank you enough and Karim enough for pushing Blueprint the way that you have, because it's really made the difference in a lot of our partners' sales efforts.
And Randy, can I put some, I know we've come off the back of Pega World, right, which was phenomenal. Like, it was the best 2 days of my life with regard to the level of engagement. But there was 2 examples of Pega World that really, really, sunk in for me. There was one of our clients from Rabobank who basically went, I don't know Pega, but relatively quickly I was able to build my own workflows. That's in a video, right? So that was democratizing and making it easy to get to value quickly. There was the Deutsche Telekom keynote, where Deutsche Telekom are kind of just over halfway through modernizing over 800 HR workflows. When they saw Blueprint, they went, it feels like Pega's priorities are our priorities. and for the final 300, they're using Blueprint. Now, these are opportunities historically we would have struggled to get access to. And that's why I'm so very excited that we are on the cusp of something. But, you know, there's a really big difference between client engagement and pipeline creation and progression. And as a community of Pega practitioners, every one of us are in this space. We need to be making sure it's easy for you to go to market. It's easy for you to take your solutions there. And we want to make sure that this is accretive to your business. But the momentum that we're getting and the feedback we're getting from clients is just phenomenal. There is a few questions that have come through.
Yeah, John, let me read them out to you if you want. So the first question comes in for Pega Gen I Blueprint. Considering we already have an application and we want to introduce a new process, is there any plan to see if Blueprint can support a piece of the process which can then be directly imported to an existing application?
The answer to that is yes. So we absolutely are doing that already in regards to how do we absorb existing assets that our clients have. In regards to how sophisticated that comes, it will only get better with time. So I'll give you a simple example in regards to importing clients' known APIs. We don't want to recreate that. We want to make sure that we're ingesting that. So yes, is the simple question there.
Great. The second question that's just come in is with Blueprint, the COE function becomes all the more critical in an org to govern new use cases that get mapped out and how they get built into an existing Pega stack without creating more app sprawl. That's another opportunity for partners. There is a risk of rogue apps with Blueprint capability if not governed. So more of a statement than a real question there.
I think what inherent within that question, look, that's a great question, but inherent within the question is, are we prepared for a massive increase in volume? And the answer is in that question in regards to no, we're probably not. Right? We're probably kind of, this is going to be something that we really need to make sure we master, that we drive reuse, that we have hygiene around the enterprise layer, that we go out of our way to ensure that there's consolidation of processes wherever they can be, that can then be changed by market or by product. I think the superpowers of Pega just got a whole lot more important. And what we want to make sure is that we're all hooked into the enterprise layer and center out, because if you do that, that takes away a lot of the complexity that we will find if we continue to do workflow by workflow. So I think that's a really good question. I think there's a lot of depth to that question, but this is the community that can, there's no better people to figure this out than this community, right? But this is our moment.
Absolutely. All right, John, looks like that's all we have for questions. Give you a couple seconds to wrap up if you need anything. But John, I can't thank you enough, man. I know how busy, well, I don't know how busy being on the C-suite is. I can only imagine how busy it is. But thank you very much for taking a few minutes to come say hello to everybody today.
Oh, look, it's absolutely my pleasure, my privilege. I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody. We had the most amazing Pega World that wouldn't have happened without all the great work from our partners. You know, I hope you're as excited as I am. We are disrupting ourselves, and with disruption comes opportunity, but it also comes, you know, change. And so let's just all go on this together, and let's stay really, really close. And it's my pleasure to hand over to Shaun and Caroline now, who's going to take us into Constellation in more detail.
Great. Thank you, John. Shaun and Caroline, take it away.
Thanks,
John
John.
Higgins, everybody. John Higgins. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Thanks, John. And yes.
Follow that, Shaun and Caroline. Sorry.
No worries. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. Yeah, I would just underscore what John is talking about. There is disruption that is great opportunity, and I think Constellation is a great part of that discussion as well. So Caroline and I and our colleague Sam Alexander had a breakout session at PegaWorld. We also spoke to a number of you at PegaWorld about Constellation. Constellation certainly was one of the major points of discussion at PegaWorld. So we're going to, hopefully, this is a bit of an ad hoc session. We'll kind of, Caroline and I will talk a little bit about Constellation. This is a major critical strategic direction for Pega. This is a huge investment for us. And we're going to talk about why we've made that investment, what what it is for those that are less familiar with that. And Caroline's going to walk you through sort of how you can start thinking about training, getting your teams up for Constellation implementations. And with that, I will actually share the deck that I thought I was sharing. Let's do this. And let's run this. Okay, and let's just make sure that you all can see this. I will assume that is yes. All right, and
I'm across great.
okay, great, excellent. I'm going to start with this 2004, and you're all probably wondering what on earth 2004 means, and what this is reminding us is when we introduced pre-Constellation UI technology and architecture. We now call it traditional UI, and this was the year that, or around the year anyway, that we introduced sections and harnesses into the product. Now, I have to say that this was before stages and steps. This was before the case designer, and much of the workflow was authored in a sort of Visio interface on a canvas. We introduced sections and harnesses, and within the section rules was the ability to weave in quite a bit of business logic from your app building directly into the UI. Okay, and that was the essential paradigm for what we now call traditional UI. Traditional UI has had an amazing run. I mean, I would say that Pega became a billion-dollar business as much on the back of traditional UI as anything else. But we did begin to notice and hear from clients of some critical concerns, and therefore made the decision to move to a new UI architecture. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those concerns. The first one was the cost of UI development. We noticed from customers that an enormous amount of deep skill in both the Pega side and also on the front end, the UI side, was necessary to construct Pega UI. And partly it is because of the fact that business logic was so tightly woven into those front ends. So we saw long dev cycles and again, a single UI that was needed to be replicated across multiple channels to replicate the business logic. UI upgrades were difficult. This is related to the sort of save as construct that we had within the section rule. If Pega introduced a piece of UI, piece of functionality, that business logic was, again, woven into the section rule. To make a modification of that, you would save it into your own rule set, and then you would have to reconcile changes if we made changes later down. So UI upgrades, extremely difficult. Accessibility compliance has become increasingly critical. This is the case certainly in Europe, where you can, law regulates that you must be accessible. We're also seeing this in the United States, in Australia, in Canada, elsewhere. We spoke with a U.S. government client at PegaWorld who is being sued by one of their employees over 508 compliance, accessibility compliance. This is a major piece of criticality with modern software. The duplication of UI is costly. So again, you would, if you had a fundamental pattern, you might implement it in 3 distinct ways. If you had three use cases that you needed to have different business logic for. Again, the UI would then be had to be duplicated as well. So inconsistent UI, and again, difficulty, long extended times. You've all been there, I'm sure. And scalability and performance is critical. And this is related to the fact that this is, a successful but 20-year-old technology, the traditional UI. And so we now need to develop much more modern stack to provide current expectations of scalability and performance. So what did that mean? That means a few things. It means that we determined to make some changes. We determined to take that business logic out of the UI, to be center out. It meant that we would have a REST API-based client-server architecture that's going to use standards. We would use what we call single-page app technology, which delivers great cross-channel compatibility, great performance. What I mean by single-page app technology is typically REST API-based, stateless typically, usually React or Angular, and all of that follows an essential principle that there be an entire UX system that is delivered to the client, to the browser or the mobile device before any data is exchanged or before any business logic is initialized. And you've all seen this in action whenever you download an app to your mobile device on the App Store or the Android store. What you're downloading is the UI, right? And then you set up an account, and now data flows back and forth to the server. The reason why it's so performant is that the UI is complete. It's a complete UX system, and it lives on the device itself, right? So what we needed to do was to build a complete UX system out of the box. So I'll pause here. This is what we mean by Pega Constellation. It is the name of Pega Infinity's current UI architecture and our current UI technology, our current UI authoring experiences, and also the name of our current out-of-the-box end user experiences. So this was announced in 2019. It's been delivered. It's now very mature. It is being used in production applications all over the world. We believe that Pega developers and Pega teams should be comfortable with Constellation now. Okay. Pega Constellation is a feature of the Infinity platform, and we expect Pega teams to understand it, to understand its value, and to be comfortable working within the new constructs. So that means a complete UX system out of the box, delivered to the browser. We wanted one that accelerates end user productivity, one that is designed around how Pega uniquely delivers workflow. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second briefly. That one that puts accessibility first. That's critical, as I mentioned, and a complete UX system to minimize build time. In other words, everything that you need to have for user experiences for Pega applications is there for you. But at the same time, provide an architecture which allows clients to bring their own UI altogether. And the reason for this has to do with self-service. We know that Pega systems are extremely powerful when in that center-out model where a single workflow can be described to work well for employees in the back office, but also for end customers on say, a website. So we needed an architecture which allows you to bring your own UI altogether. Constellation is to UI what Stages and Steps, the case designer, was for workflow. So before the case designer, we saw a lot of this. This is what I call spaghetti flow monsters. And some of you who have been around a long time in this Pega business know exactly what I'm talking about. Developers build apps in an ad hoc manner without any structure. And the result is opaque business logic, which took far too long to deliver, and which typically only the original developers really understood. This is actually Pega's Smart Dispute app before Stages and Steps, and this is the same app after converting to Stages and Steps. So Stages and Steps creates a clear organization, a structure, a rule schema where app building becomes more predictable and easier for both a business and IT to understand and to collaborate upon. And that's exactly what Constellation does with UI. This is just as we battled spaghetti flow monsters, we battled spaghetti section monsters, where business logic in the form of conditional visibility, embedded sections, action sets, etc., also made business logic extremely opaque and took far too long to deliver. So Constellation provides a completely new framework for UI, which abstracts and organizes data and workflow logic and places them into a semantic structure, which corresponds to regions on a screen. That's the essential premise of the Constellation system. The authoring experience extends the case designer, which did the very same thing for workflow, and greatly reducing enterprise app building. And indeed, the Constellation UI authoring is literally a tab in the case designer, as you can see here. So if you've tried Pega Blueprint, I'm sure you've heard of it at this point, you can see an almost magical display of this semantic structure in action. So Blueprint flows data and workflow into the essential framework that makes up Constellation: screen regions, forms, menus, panels, utilities, etc. It's highly structured, it's highly organized, and it's instantly assembled. And this could not have been possible with the previous UI kit or Theme Cosmos or any of the traditional UI. So this is a huge value here we see in adopting the Constellation standards for Pega apps because of this structure. Additionally, the UX system conforms to front-end best practices out of the box, including accessibility. So Constellation has been delivered as accessible first, right? Everything we add to the system has been poured over for accessibility, working with some of our most accessibility conscious customers, for instance, the United States government. Accessibility is not something that can be done in an ad hoc manner. It has to be systematized. And we've seen our efforts been noted by third-party accessibility auditors such as Level Access. So customization of UI can hurt accessibility and also potentially open up customers to security threats as well. And therefore, at the core of this complete Constellation UX system is best front-end practices for accessibility and also for security as well. But there's also the sort of nuts and bolts usability, right? Out of the box, these are crisp interfaces, perfect alignment and spacing, very quick, very responsive. The system has provide leaps in core end user productivity. So adding essential value to Pega applications. Indeed, people using Constellation will get more work done faster. And we were delighted to see a partner, EY, at Pega World put this up on the screen, that following the implementation of Pega Constellation, the client observed a measurable improvement in operational efficiency and a significant reduction in manual errors, leading to a marked increase in productivity across department. Right, and I've highlighted in past years, you may have heard me speak at Pega Worlds or other events in the past about some of these core usability features: the compact spacing, the use of panels and utilities and tabs and preview panels and summary panels and such. So I'm just going to very quickly highlight a few of some of the newer features in the latest versions of Infinity. Talk about how they deliver both great experiences, but also talk about how they radically shorten development time. So a very simple example of this would be the out-of-the-box Constellation search and select pattern, which was really critical to the new Constellation version of Pega customer service. So typically in business apps, agents or caseworkers need often to quickly find like a single customer out of possibly millions. And so the Constellation search and select template helps an agent do just that extremely efficiently, and equally important, can be delivered in minutes rather than hours, days, or weeks, which is what it often took in the traditional UI. So let's pretend that as an agent, we're on the phone with a customer. We can choose whether or not that's a consumer or a business on the call. We can then search by particular fields, perhaps name, perhaps social security number if we have it, and then we filter all of those same names if there are multiple names in the system and select the specific customer, right? This is essentially, and by the way, the selection columns can be different from the search fields because we might want a field to input a social security number, but we don't want a list of social security numbers on display. Submitting the form submits a single value that then advances the workflow. So all of this experience is really a single control set on a single field. And this is a business application necessity. The end user experience is simple, which is good, but equally important is the authoring experience of this, which is also extremely easy to use. This is a model-driven authoring of a very complex control. In traditional UI, this pattern would have been constructed across lots of different applications in myriad custom ways, right? And there now is a way to get a search and select template, very simple to use. Developers simply click data pages representing these search for categories, and then create discrete search by criteria as field groups, and then finally selection criteria as columns in a table. Simple as that. Another quick typical example of how we think about providing a complete UX system for enterprise applications is the use of what we call promoted filters, promoted actions. Promoted filters and actions help end users take, quick, the ability to quick filter a list or maybe a data visualization or a quick action on a business object. And this is often something mandated by various UX designers who want end users to be reacting quickly in ways that they presume will happen a lot. Promoted filters are presented just above the list or the visualization. Promoted actions are present in the Constellation summary panel just below the case header. Okay. And similarly to search and select, these are common patterns in business apps, but previously each implementation was custom, was bespoke, was not consistent, and sometimes took days or weeks to build. Now, with a clear and organized approach to development, adding promoted filters or promoted actions to apps is now as trivial as clicking a few checkboxes and determining which data or which actions should be promoted. Very simple. And the last example of a complete UX system is forms, which are at the core of a caseworker's experience with Pega workflow. Now, forms in Pega are different from other platforms. I mean, not really the forms themselves per se, but how they're delivered to end users. Pega is distinct in how forms are delivered, what I would call just in time, rendered dynamically for specific users at the correct time in a workflow. So if anyone has ever observed a receptionist at a dentist office, for instance, knows exactly what happens without this just-in-time guided workflow. The receptionist has this enormous form with dozens of tabs and is trying to navigate through all that to input the right data for the current situation. For instance, when to schedule your next visit. Now, if that office visit workflow had been orchestrated by Pega, the moment you finished your time in the dentist chair, that correct form for scheduling your next visit would already be in front of the receptionist. And that's why I call it guided workflow. But sometimes teams, even UX designers not familiar with this Pega's guided workflow principles have ended up creating really unproductive experiences. And so Constellation is designed around guided workflow and allows at least 3 distinctive modes of forms within this Pega guided workflow construct. The first is our default, which is like one and done. In other words, an individual is given simple fields to fill, he or she presses submit, and the form is gone and the assignment completed. Then there's a conditional screen to screen, and here a form behaves like a wizard. Multiple sequential steps are presented to the user. Subsequent screens, of course, may have may be conditionalized by earlier input. And then there's what we call the hierarchical long form. And these are all templated within the Constellation authoring experience. The hierarchical long form is meant for an individual or perhaps an entire team who may need to enter a lot of data non-sequentially over time, for instance, over weeks, not minutes. For example, in banks, there's a due diligence process, which is often typically the creation of that initial case can be weeks at a time. So information needing to be for a particular step in that workflow is entered non-sequentially. And form fields can be organized in a logical, hierarchical manner. The structure of these, we call them form groups, can be set up hierarchically for easy navigation for an entire team to manage. And the authoring experience for this hierarchical long form, which is to the right here, is completely center out. It's agnostic of the presentation, right? So here we just changing it from a default form to this hierarchical form, and now we we add these form groups which are presented as tabs, but they could be presented with a different UX system, not as tabs, but maybe as blocks or some other UX pattern. So we believe that by providing templated experiences that cover critical business application use cases, which can be configured at 1/10 of the time that it takes to build custom, and which deliver crisp and consistent secure interfaces with proper accessibility, and most of all, honor that semantic structure of Pega, that we provide huge value to customers. Thus, if you're building in Constellation, you should build as much as you can. Our expectation is that you build as much as you can using the out-of-the-box options. You build the app first completely out of the box, and then you get feedback before assuming you need anything custom. But sophisticated apps may need extension points, and when used appropriately, extensibility is there for you in Constellation. For instance, if the client needs a fingerprint reader in their UI and we don't have one, you can assemble Constellation's presentational components, these little bits and pieces, together with third-party tech or your own tech for a net new componentry, which can be used and then reused by app developers. And as Caroline will talk about shortly, you should make very careful business decisions on investing in these custom, what we call DX components for employee portals. Simply because someone in the business wants buttons on the left versus the right doesn't mean that that's the right decision for the customer. And it doesn't mean that you want to be on the hook for endangering the considerable value that the customer is getting from front-end best practices, crisp and consistent secure interfaces with proper accessibility, and most of all, that semantic structure of Pega, right? Especially if solutions, and we've seen some out there, which are not taking into account core design principles, core Pega design principles that we build into a Constellation UX system. So now, on the other hand, for self-service use cases, we recommend taking advantage of the Constellation open architecture and extending the Pega solution into the enterprise existing digital assets, for instance, websites. Right? Self-service should be very consistent with other experiences that end customers engage in. And there's a mapping layer provided by the Constellation SDKs, allowing you to bring a complete other UX system, and we had a booth at PegaWorld on this. It was quite popular. So anyway, so these are some of the highlights of Constellation as a complete UX system. This is a system, again, that accelerates end user productivity, designed around how Pega uniquely delivers workflow, puts accessibility first, radically minimizes build time, adds a semantic structure and a clear organization to this critical aspect of enterprise application building, and is also an architecture which allows the use of a client digital assets like their website. So again, I'm just going to state that Constellation is a critical strategic direction for Pega. This is where our investment in UI will be. You're not going to see the ability for things like Blueprint to be working with the traditional UI. And it is our expectation that teams are understanding how Constellation works and are building in Constellation now. And so I'm going to hand off to Caroline, who's going to discuss how you could take advantage of this.
Shaun and Caroline, before we jump further, I know Caroline has seen some of them. Do you want to talk a little bit about the questions that came in real quick in real time, or do you want to hold those off until Caroline's finished?
We can certainly answer unless her portion might answer them as well. So that's a
yeah. I got one question for you, Shaun, and then we'll go through and I'll ask as we go because I've been trying to follow the questions. So
okay, great.
I wasn't sure about, that's a little bit of a unique one. I've not seen this before, is that we have a client that looks at App Studio, Dev Studio, and Deployment Manager as a reference point for building screens. And they're curious to see if those studios will be updated to the same architecture. And so that's a unique question that I've not seen before.
So the question is would our authoring environments be updated to sort of using Constellation pieces and parts, for instance, like rebuilding in React? The answer is that currently the UI authoring pieces are actually React. So when you're building the views, the view rules in App Studio, which is a necessity for Constellation, you're actually using Constellation as that authoring itself. We don't currently have plans to rebuild all of App Studio or all of Dev Studio. Although I will say that for those looking at in the future to Launchpad as a very different product, very different business strategy around it, but that is taking more advantage of that UI architecture. But we do not have plans currently to do any radical change on App Studio or Dev Studio in terms of the UI architecture.
Okay, David, did that answer your question? And if not, we'll revisit it at the end. But let's continue on so that we can cover the last bit, because I think everyone gets so excited and then they say, well, how do we practically bring this into our worlds? So I try to, talk to teams about how they're adopting. So I sit along with Shaun's team and our GCS team as they go through support calls and have an understanding of where people get tripped up and how we can help them and do better in our explanations. So the first thing that I like to remind folks of, if we can click to the next slide, is that Constellation has a strategy embedded in it. And that's that really quick time to value being one side of the coin, where the infinite extensibility has a nice clean line now, and you're in a very clear world of extension points, so that when you hit those upgrades, you're not chasing around and trying to figure out where the app forked and that you need to go reconcile. So we have that nice clean line. When Pega generates UI, we think that UI objectively is great when it has the attributes on the left side of the screen, when it's accessible, when it's extensible, when it's trainable. The Pega out-of-the-box UI is excellent for your back office in the sense that consistency is your friend. You want everybody entering the same information the same way, so that in your BI layer, when you go to interpret it, it all means the same thing and there's not that variation, and that everybody had the same opportunity to enter information correctly. When you do want to extend, what we've tried to do in Constellation is really unlock things that were not unlocked before. So you can bring React, you can bring Angular or web components if you're bringing your own front end, and you can have that real true front end experience in terms of, I need to have something perfectly matched to my website. Those are the times when you're going to want to extend and when you're going to spend a little bit more time on getting those screens built. We believe that if you stick to the out-of-the-box screens for your back office, for when you have trained usage, you're going to have really great outcomes, and you don't need to spend that time if you're doing it in that way. But let's click on, when is it appropriate? Because we've got some questions in the chat. They said, we're doing this or we're doing that. When do we use Constellation? Do we migrate? Kind of taking a step back, new workflows, absolutely Constellation is appropriate for. So if you're introducing a new workflow, we'd like to see you do that with Constellation. If you're doing any of the things that Center Out is really best suited for, you know, you're doing a front to back office, or you're doing a self-service workflow. So you're bringing something that originated on your customer portal or your website, you're bringing it all the way through your front to back office, and you need those screens to be different for the different users, but all interconnect with one workflow. Constellation is excellent at that. The last one I call hidden value drivers, and I think I got a question in the chat that said, can I switch out my traditional screens? Can I migrate? I posted the article for how you would go about achieving that. Hidden value drivers are those business reasons to uplift your screens. So if you've got a new security regulation, if you have accessibility concerns, if you're in a highly regulated industry and you anticipate you'll start seeing those in the future, you're probably going to want to get on a path to address those hidden value drivers over time, similar to how you would if you wanted to do any sort of project. You're going to want to uplift those UIs, but you may need to do some more work to educate people about why. Why is this a business focus? Why do we need to do this? But let's keep zooming so that we can give Scott some time. So that's when you'd use Constellation. The metaphor I always like to use is we are changing highways. You're going really fast down traditional highway, and that's awesome. You're delivering amazing results for clients, but we want to make a turn. So the first thing is leadership, people understanding when Constellation is appropriate, when it's less appropriate to transition an application because it's generating great business value. There's nothing wrong with it. When you go to do an enhancement to it, then consider Constellation if you're introducing a new case type. Preparation is key. So we offer a bunch of new enablement series on Pega Academy. We also have docs.pega.com that is rich with content. We have new materials about how to extend on docs.pega.com. Watching out for potholes. You're always going to do risk mitigation if you're making a change. This is a change. If you start to see things go off the rails, if your teams are taking a really long time to deliver, you're going to want to time out and say, hey guys, what's going on? Is it that we don't know how we're going about this, or we're getting Figma boards that tell us that we need to extend, but the business doesn't understand what that might imply? Maybe we need to revisit those Figma boards in our refinement process. So don't be shy about double clicking and saying what's going on. We're expecting this increased time to value. We're expecting these screens go out much faster. Why not? And the last one is you're going to spend some time enabling. We want to see you get that time back and more. And we believe the combination of Constellation plus Blueprint is going to, blow expectations out of the water. But we want you to focus on getting that time back and getting that value back. So rapid release cycles, getting things into production quickly. Specifics, you're all familiar with user stories. I want a functionality or a capability so that mindset is critically important. Focusing on the outcome versus the specific screen or the preference that you might have or your business stakeholder might have. Those are tough conversations, but they're useful. They're how you keep your maintenance low. They're how you don't build things that nobody ever uses. So those are really important, is always making sure that your business team is giving you the so that your team can go off and say, here are your options. Here's how you hit the budget you want. Here's how you want to hit the timeline that you're looking for, and really meet the business where they are with the different things that they can achieve. You're going to want to avoid putting the exact solution in the requirements. I put my Gen AI version of the swing set engineering picture that I think probably a lot of folks have seen, where you can achieve the same outcome a lot of different ways. Two people can swing. There's lots of different ways that you can achieve that. So not defining your outcomes in your requirements is a mistake, but defining the solution precisely is also a mistake. These other ones are fairly basic. They're just simple strategies. Reserving points for training, discussing heavy customizations and extension points with stakeholders, letting them know, hey, this is a point where you're embarking on spending a little bit more in both implementation and maintenance. Being specific about your strategy for extension. When do you extend? Does it mean that you get a better NPS score? Does it mean that you get data quicker? Does it mean you get better quality data? Those are all great reasons to build a custom UI. But having an objective matrix of reasons why is something that we've seen people have success with, because then they can turn around and say, hey, no, that doesn't match our list. We agreed that we were going to extend when this was true. And if that's not true, then you're not going to necessarily want to spend that money, or you're going to want to really understand why. The last two were potholes, so you don't want to pause everything. There's no reason to stop what you're doing to regroup and you know, think that everything is totally different. All the same rules that you're familiar with, data transforms, you know, your connectors and your services, those are all staying the same. So the screens are different, but everything that you're familiar with Pega behind that is the same. And then the last one is, if you're new to something, start small, get your hello world under your belt, and then incrementally increase skill sets. I think that when people go from working on traditional UI projects and then they flip over immediately, they skip training, they kind of jump into an advanced use case, that's where we see people get really tripped up. And that's where teams get frustrated, business teams get concerned, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. So if we click on, we've got just 2 minutes. So your skill sets for building in Pega out of the box, those are going to be similar. You're going to want to take the Constellation adoption mission so that you've seen a bunch of examples, you've clicked, you have the experience of doing the clicks. If you're like me, you're somebody who needs to click themselves. It doesn't work to see a demo. It doesn't work to, you know, see a recording. I have to do the clicking to actually learn. So your shortest time to value is your Pega skills, being aware of DX API, your infinite extensibility when you do want to, you know, connect into your customer portal, you do want to extend on your website, match your design system one for one. You're going to want to do that with React skills, Angular, or web components if you're bringing an entire UI yourself. And just for the sake of time, we'll keep going. Where we see the community land today. Awareness is very important. We're asking all stakeholders to be aware of what DX componentry is. So when you do need to extend the out-of-the-box UI, that's what we're working on. Functional and advanced, those are skill sets for architects. So Pega architects in the functional space, those are folks that can go to design.pega.com, consume a component that's not available yet in App Studio, deploy it into their ecosystem. Advanced users can then take that, augment it, change it, make it more functional, give it some more, you know, capability. This last one we get asked about a lot. When you do have your own front end, when you have your own website, your own customer portal, whatever technology that's written in, you're going to need to pair that expert up with your Pega engineers so that they can make the connection. And that's typical integration work. So if we keep zooming so that we can get Scott some time, just to reflect, we're doing new workflows and applications are appropriate for Constellation. Modifying that select functionality using coexistence and blended UI is also super appropriate. The infinity factor, I think, addresses one of the questions partially in the chat, and that is we've got sales automation, we've got customer service. Those are both available with Constellation. Customer service, you can move incrementally. I will check on sales automation. And then I believe the answer to the rest of that question is there will be announcements for other industry applications in the coming weeks and months for their moves to Constellation. But I think that the most important thing for this community is to understand what a successful implementation looks like. And that, you know, do all the teammates know what their, you know, charters are? Do they have that under their belt in terms of their hello worlds? Do they feel confident sizing and scoping? You know, are they focused on the outcomes over the specific UI? And do they extend only when that capability or that outcome isn't available out of the box so that you're retaining that high time to value, or rather the low time to value, the high speed to value? And the last one is being comfortable saying, I understand you really like that UI. Let's use an out-of-the-box UI to understand if it's worth building. So that last one is tough. That last one takes a little bit of guts sometimes, depending on the person on the other side of the table. And so we empathize with that part of the change. So let me pause there. And Scott, I only give you 4 minutes, but I want to make sure that we have time for that. And then we can take the questions offline and respond with Randy asynchronously.
Caroline, thank you, man. That was fantastic. I really appreciate it. Shaun, great job. As you said, we'll take a look offline. We've got the names of the questions. So if you've asked a question and we haven't got to you, I will certainly get back to you directly with your email. And I thank you very much. Scott Holz, take it away. Take us home.
All right. Can everybody hear me and see my screen?
Loud and clear.
Great. So I hope that everyone took away a few things. One, Constellation is the future for Pega, and it is the future for partners developing with Pega. And to that end, this is an opportunity for people to learn new capabilities, but it's also a challenge because people have to change the fundamental way you approach building UI. And to that end, there are a lot of enablement resources that are available. I'm showing on the screen, if this is a new edition, if you want a single point of reference to go to Pega Community. Under the products, click on the Constellation link, and that will bring you to the Constellation landing page where it links out to enablement, it links out to docs.pega.com, it links out to a bunch of great recorded webinars from a variety of Constellation sessions that we've done in the past. But I would say come ready to put aside your preconceptions about how you build UI and be open to a new approach that's different and in a lot of ways better. So to that end, because we are excited about driving partner uptake of Constellation capabilities, for those of you who are at Pega World, we announced this Reach for the Stars Constellation contest. There are 3 steps to earning points in the contest, and if you go to the link that's shown on the screen on partners.pega.com, you will see all the details. But basically, the first step is achieving Constellation adoption badges. Constellation adoption is a mission that was converted from a boot camp that is very much about what do I need to know and think about and do to be ready to adopt Constellation capabilities. It is the starting point that everyone should go through before they get onto a Constellation project. The second step is registering your projects where Constellation is involved, progressing those and going live. So there will be points awarded for Constellation projects that go live. And lastly, for those of you who are interested in developing DX components, submitting and having DX components accepted by the product team is the third way that you can earn points. There are big prizes, which you can read about on the page, but we really want to feature those partners who are stepping up, raising their hand and saying, yes, I want to embrace Constellation, and I want to be on the cutting edge of what Pega is building here. So thank you. I know we're at time. Randy, I'll hand it back to you for any closing remarks.
Scott, thank you, mentor. Really appreciate. Great job. All right, real quick. So here we are at the end. 345 days till Pega World 2025. All right, so I'm kidding there a little bit. It's true. Never too late to start early, I guess they say. But what's important on that screen is pegaworld.com has all the replays, everything that you need to see, everything that you need to know if you were there and you missed it, or if you didn't get out to Pega World this year, then that's how it went. You can go there and you can see everything that we had. I want to take a minute to thank everybody who's been on this call today. Your expertise is just beyond reproach. I really thank you, Shaun, Caroline, Scott, and John Higgins. We'll see you on July 12th. That's the next second Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern time for the next Pega Power Hour. Until then, thank you very much for signing in. Sell and be well. Thank you again.